My name's Ashley Schafer, and today I'm going to talk about getting a horse to rate and stop. I have a lot of different horses in training and a lot of different styles. Some of my horses are really ratey, really turny, real more short-strided, and I'm always working on getting them to kind of reach. And then I have others that are a lot freer style and a lot pushier and a little bit more like longer strided, and I have to gather them a lot. This particular horse is more of the freer style, and I have to work a lot on just keeping him gathered and making sure that he'll kind of come back to me. So I work on rate a lot with him. That being said, I do work on rate with all of them because all of them have to rate to turn, especially to turn the way that I want them to and use themselves correctly. But also, it's not always necessarily about getting them to rate, it's getting them to rate correctly. I want my horses to know that when they rate, they need to come back to me and kind of roll back on their butt and get gathered, like get rounded through their back and stay collected with it. But also, I'll step their hip a little to the inside. Like if I'm stopping at the barrels, if I'm stopping at the first barrel, after I stop, I'll usually step their hip just a little bit to the right. If I'm stopping at the second barrel, I'll kick it just a little bit to the left. This horse does it really well. Like I barely touch him and he just moves that hip over, okay? And what that does is it teaches them, they get to the point where whichever barrel I'm at, when I sit down, they know that this, say I'm stopping at the first barrel, they know this left foot's coming. So they go ahead and just get themselves in that position. Well, then when I go fast, when I sit down, they go ahead and step that hip to the inside, which elevates their shoulder, okay? So without me manually having to pick their shoulder up, I can sit and they just go, they step that hip to the inside and they pick that shoulder up for me, okay? And it keeps me from having to handle them a bunch in my run, okay? Because I feel like every time we touch the bridle reins, we're creating some resistance, which is causing it, it's losing time on the clock. So I feel like the more broke that we can get them to our body cues and the less we have to use these in our run, the better off we are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about stopping and rating. And this is a good horse for me to do that on because I do a lot of it with him because he's very free. He's a very free runner. He can really run and he's got a really long stride. So I have to always make sure that when I let him go like that, I can gather him and he'll collect and come back to me, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do it on the pattern today. So I'll show you, I'm gonna lope him around here and I'm gonna let him go. I'm not gonna ask him to run to the first, but I'm gonna give him his head and I'm gonna let him go his own speed, okay? And then I'll show you what I do to make sure he'll come back to me. He was a little bouncy with it, but he came back, okay? You can see that I let him go completely, and then I want to sit first, so I want to kind of melt to the saddle, then I'll come with my reins, okay? I'm going to counter arc him off of it. And he's getting a little forward on me. I want him to kind of come back with that. Carlos. And I want him to, I'm gonna get after him a little bit for that because he's just laying on my bridle and that's exactly what I don't want. When he goes up there and I ask him to rate, I don't want him to do this because then he's gonna hollow out, okay? So I'm gonna do it again and this time we'll see what happens. That was a little better. He bounced a little, but not terrible. Good boy. I'm going to accept it, and I always back them up when I stop because I always want them to think about, you know, drawing up right here and getting on their butt, okay? So he has his hips stepped a little bit to the inside anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then I'll stop them, like, I stop them right here kind of where I want their front feet to get to, and then I back them up. Sometimes I'll walk back forward and bring them to that spot again. I want them to be real comfortable with this spot, okay? So I want him to chill too. I'm not mad at him. You know, I don't want this to be like a tuning session where he thinks that I'm mad because I don't want this to be an uncomfortable spot for him, okay? So a lot of times I'll come up here and sit until he'll take a breath and chill out because I don't want it to be a scary spot, okay? Then I'll lope around it a couple of times. And then the same thing to the second. I'm gonna let him go, whatever speed he wants. Whoa. And then I'm gonna ask him to come back. but I don't hold him to it, okay? I'm not bleeding the brakes. I'm just kind of letting him go and then asking him to come back. Now I'm gonna make him chill here a minute. Again, I don't want him to think I'm mad at him. I'm not mad, I'm just making him very responsive, okay? I'm gonna walk up to his other spot where I would want his front feet to get to. I'm gonna hang out here a second. Just get him to kind of chill out. Good boy. I'm gonna wiggle in the saddle a little bit too. I got him to sit still by me sitting still. Now I wanna make sure that he'll sit still with me moving around a little too. I just want him to get comfortable. Good boy. Whoop. I'm loose reined. I'm not holding him in this position. Okay. Whoa. Good, he's getting pretty comfortable. Okay. Now I'll lope around it a couple of times. We'll do it to the third. Whoa. Walk back up here to where I want his front feet to get to. Like I said, I'm gonna make him just sit here and get comfortable. Good boy. Okay. I also want him to be able to transition like that, okay? So if I ask him, sit and ask him to stop like that, I want him to stop. But if I'm asking him gently like I just did, I want him to break down to a trot, then a walk, and then come down, okay? I think transitions are just as important as stopping. I don't necessarily want to stop like that all the time because it'll get him a little scotchy. And he's almost to that point where he's starting to rate enough where I can just transition more than, but at first I had to get my point across because he was getting to that point where he was just going as hard as he could. And when I sat and asked him to come to, he was just going here and getting strung out and running around his turns, okay? So I went back and made sure that when I sit down and ask you to come to me, you better be thinking about really stopping. But like I said, now we're getting to the point where he's starting to really rate. He placed at a Futurity this last weekend with a really tough group of horses, worked really good. I'm really happy with the progress we're making. But before it goes too far the other way, I'll adjust it a little bit when I feel like he's ready and just transition. So it's important to be able to do both. And it's really important to remember that there's that balance. What works on one for so long, I may have to adjust that a little bit later, okay? So however I work my horses, it changes depending on how they're working, okay? So it varies all the time. That's just part of the process, which is my favorite part. I love the process. I crave the different stages in their career, and it keeps me thinking all the time. But I just want people to remember that, because you can't do the same thing all the time and expect it to keep working. You got to change with your horse.